All right. Hey, everybody. This is Scott Howard with Earthen Natural Building. And we're just kicking off a series of interviews here with all these amazing natural builders and bioarchitects that I happen to know. And the first in the series here is Mr. David Mitsak from Australia, from Sydney, a good friend of mine. And we have been participating together the last couple of years in our club that we call the Inventors Corner. There's a bunch of professional natural builders. So yeah, thanks for being here, David.
My pleasure, Scott. It's great to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know you're in Melbourne right now, so I know it's a bit cold, but you got your tea.
Yeah, I got my tea. I got my heater, and I'm stealing power from my brother's. I'm in my brother's daughter's bedroom, and she's got a little heater in here. And I'm most people just leave their house, these modern houses, to go to work, and they turn them off because it's too, it's so expensive to run them. So it's just like, as we were just talking about, it's so here I am huddled up with a heater that I'm not supposed to be, because he said, I hope you don't stay at home just with the heater on all day. And I wasn't planning to do that, but for this interview, there's no other way. It's like an icebox in here, like I can see my own damn breath.
Oh man. Well, yeah. So, I wanted to interview you, David, because you're one of those people I know that I feel you definitely should be famous, all the wonderful work you've done. And I know that you're not famous, just like me. But that's all right. That's why we're doing these interviews. We're going to get this word out to the people about what we're all about, and tell them about your works and stuff. So I had the pleasure of reading the draft version of a couple of books I think that you wrote recently over the pandemic. Let's see, it was the Muddyfesto and the Role of the Curator. A couple of different books, and I really enjoyed those. And you're really just laying it down about the entire, the perspective of the natural builders in this modern era, and what we can do to get people into the mud and empowered by earthen building, and to take control of their shelter, and beyond that, really their lives, and make themselves, like you said, the main character in their own story, And so I just love your philosophy, and you're a philosopher for sure, in my view. And just you have a lot to share. I know you've worked on so many natural building projects over the years. You were in Atlanta, and I think other parts of the US. You've done a lot in Australia and India, and Mexico, I think you mentioned as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, about all of that, or
just your general work experience in natural building, and what kind of stuff you've gotten into.
Yeah, well, when you mention all those places, I think first and foremost, I should mention that when I was 19, I went to the Solomon Islands. So my travels, I think a lot of my travels, outside of a 10-year corporate stint, which corporate and what do you call it, international corporate telecommunications, like I was in that world, but from the age of 19, and all my traveling became about this other reality that I experienced when I was 19, and I went to stay with the islander people here in this region of the world. There's some islands just off the coast of Australia, and the people and it was a very remote area. So it's just like what we were talking about before this call started being recorded, is that I'm not sure that many people know just how these original people, and like I said, I want to call them, I don't think we need a new word for these original people who live in the original way, which is different to this sort of this modern world that I find myself in right now, which I'm looking at to be more and more fictitious and more sort of, it's almost like what people are awakening with food. It's like you've got normal, you've got normal food and chemical food. So chemical food is the food that is in all of our supermarkets, and it's produced with all kind of machinery and chemicals, and it's like factory created food. But then there's just the natural food, and the same thing goes for these people. So I experienced just an incredible generosity of spirit, and I've seen it in all those places around the world where the concepts of rent or mortgages are completely alien. It's the opposite. So it's not, when people see you, they're not thinking like, okay, I'm going to charge him rent or a mortgage payment. So I'm starting to look at those concepts, the concept of paying rent or paying a mortgage, as a fictitious, unrealistic game that we're all participating in, to be a part of something else that it's some sort of experiment. Whereas it's a new experiment that we're living in the modern world. So I see it more and more that this is an unrealistic world, whereas the way that original people are living, and there's so many of them, we're people in the cities think that the original people are going extinct, and that's the story they're telling us in school. Oh yeah, the Native Americans are extinct, and the Native Australians are extinct, and wherever you go, even in India, they're saying, oh, the tribal people, they've gone extinct, but they're not. You go out into every place beyond the city, and they're thriving in a sense that there's unlimited amounts of food that they're producing. There's unlimited. There's seemingly for each visitor unlimited amounts of shelter. Everywhere I go to these places, the people sort of like, oh, we like you. Why don't you just live here with us? What about one of these houses, or do you want to be up on the hill, or maybe down there at the river, or there's some, like, this is what we've got. Like, do any of these houses please you? And you just take some of the land over there and you can farm it. Like you said, like, there's plenty of people here that you might want to, join up with their family. Like, you can be part of if any of these people, because the brothers will come up and be like, hey, do you like my sister? Because I'd like to be your brother. Like, everyone has something to give. And it's like, can you be my brother? And it's like, well, how is that? Oh, well, you just have to marry one of my sisters or one of my cousins, and then we're brothers.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
That's funny.
It's like the opposite. Everything's the opposite. This is the fake, unrealistic world where everything's like, like everything's limited, and it's like, you need this to get to that. It's just like the video games. Like, I watch them play the videos, and you got to get these things before you can do that.
Yeah.
Because you need these to get through that thing. And then once you get there, you got to take those things and get to the next. And you're constantly needing things to get to the next place. Whereas original people have a currency that is the opposite. It's gifting based. It's based on giving and giving and giving. And someone just recently told me this up in Brisbane. She's Fijian, and I think she said the words kiri kiri. And her grandmother was teaching about it, and she's finally figured out what it all means. And kiri kiri is on the principle of, like, it's because her husband was saying he thought barter, the system of barter, was really advanced, like where people, because it looks like barter. When you go to it looks like people are bartering. They're not bartering. It's a whole nother level. It's called, like in Fiji, it's called kiri kiri, but it's like when you see someone, you give. What you give. And if for some strange reason, you notice that somebody is not giving, then all the alarm bells goes off, and everyone finds out and gives to that person more until they have everything they need.
Wow.
It's not. And so from the perverted view of the savage beast in these cities, who's constantly trying to scramble and pay their rent and their mortgage and get to work on time before they get fired, so that, before they lose their wife and before they crash out of the game. you know, from their point of view, it looks like they're bartering. It's like, oh, I'll give you a mango if you give me a pineapple. It's like, no, it's like, I just got 100 mangoes. I can only eat one right now. Is there 99 other people around? Hey, you know, and it's like, yeah. And so it's this concept of giving, and that reality pervades everything. And shelter is just a part of it. But when I'm here in the Western world, like Australia, and I experience in America, it's in England, it's everywhere. It's every single country on earth now has a city reality where, you know, shelter is the biggest expense. It's the biggest thing, and it's the most scary thing to lose. You know, being homeless. You know, until you've been homeless, you talk to homeless people, they go, I thought it was going to be bad. It's actually not that bad. Like, I thought it was going to be way worse than what it is, but you know, it's still probably bad to be homeless. But what I'm saying is, like, they're at least a little bit awoken to how overrated shelter is. Like, and I'm not, but so what I mean by that is, it's overrated in the sense that if someone told you when you're a kid, like, oh, you're going to have to work for 30 years and pretty much go to work every day, and we'll give you a couple of days off, you know, but you're going to have to work all day, every day, for your entire life. But then you still might not have ownership of this thing called shelter. Like, you wouldn't buy into it. Like, so what I think it's time for us in us unrealistic man. I want to call us unrealistic man. Like, we're just dreamers. We're total dreamers. Anyone who thinks that they want to live in the city world and live this life is a total and utter dreamer. They're kidding themselves. They're in a fantasy land. They're in their own science fiction. It's not going to happen. Nothing that you think is going to happen in this city modern world is going to actually really happen. It's all a fantasy.
Right. Yeah, the American dream, right?
Yeah, well, like the American dream. Yeah, that's right. It's I guess America is the pinnacle of it all, isn't it? America is the pinnacle of it all, and so once you realize that the American dream is not all that, then you realize, well, the Australian dream, or even the Shanghai dream, or the Tokyo dream, or wherever you want to go on planet Earth, the city dream is laced with a lot of unrealistic BS that if you really knew that that's what it was about, you might not necessarily play the game. You know, you might not get into the game. And so what I love about natural builders, when I first found out about natural builders, is that there was something about them that reminded me of all these indigenous people, in the sense that they had no fear of just building a wall, like without any kind of qualification, without any kind of paperwork or legislation or authority or permission. They were just like, so to me, the natural builders of the Western world are like little kindergarten toddlers just emerging and taking one step towards becoming those gifting-based community masters of reality, who have unlimited shelter and unlimited food to give to anyone who crosses their path.
Yes,
you know,
definitely.
Anyone who crosses their path. And just like a child wants to run out, and they're not running out, they want to play with you. That's what children want. They come to see you because they want to play. And it's like, hey, let's play.
Yeah.
So that's what children want. And each of us is really the same. Like, we really just want to play. And so I find that natural builders are like that. We're like the toddlers of the world, and so I feel like I've my travels have been really just I'm always looking for those and so I seem to always bump into the most generous people because they're out there. And so there's this lie that's being told that there's no generous people, there's only selfish people. And so if you don't get your shit, you'll miss out. But, you know, I learned from before I went to the Solomon Islands, I left high school and walked out on the side of the road with a backpack, and I hitchhiked around the entire country for a year. So I was just transported around the entire continent just on the generosity of people going, hell yeah, I want to pick up a 17-year-old kid. And out of the, I don't know how many people there would have been that carried me around that journey for a year, but there was really only one or two that were a little bit shady. Everybody else was just had all the good intentions you could ever want.
Yeah, I experience the same thing traveling around the world all the time. People, hey, you can stay at my house, and oh, I'm going to leave, but you can just house it for me, and just really trusting, really generous, and a lot of people. It's a cultural thing in a lot of places in the world too, that they really believe in welcoming travelers. And so if you have a kind demeanor and good energy, people will just bring you right in. And I mean, it sounds to me like you got into natural building kind of on the same reasons that I did, which is coming out of kind of an anthropological kind of perspective. Like, what is my culture? If I can study what is my culture through looking at other cultures, and then traveling and kind of comparing notes. Okay, what are you guys doing on this other country, and what are we doing here in like the Western cities? And then kind of bringing it all together and saying, well, what can we do about this? And I think what you're saying, what I resonate with, is that natural building and natural builders are kind of like the answer to this, is like synthesizing how we can integrate the original cultures of the earth with where we're at now.
Yeah, and I think our biggest challenge would be that we were programmed as we were born into Western culture, and I know Western culture is not the right word, but I'll just call it fictitious man. The fictitious man that thinks that getting a mortgage and a job is gonna solve all the world's problems. So we were born, fictitious man as we are, we're born into this reality of lack. And so what we're up against is that we look around, and the program that we're in is like there's nothing, everything's in lack, and bills are coming at you left, right, and center. And so it's like, how am I going to survive? And I think there's some, I don't know the answers. I have none of the answers in terms of but I can feel, I know that reality of original man. I know the reality of original man, and the generosity of spirit, and the unlimited amounts of food, and delicious food. I'm talking about the best naturally grown, exquisite food that just pleases the soul. And it might take, in the Solomon Islands, they light a big fire underground, and it takes forever to cook the food, but when it comes out, it's to die for. So they have unlimited food, they have unlimited shelter, they have unlimited humor, they have unlimited time for stories, and they have unlimited sort of time. That's the other thing. It's food, shelter, time, and space. They have unlimited amounts of that. I know that reality exists, but yet here I am in the other reality, in the non-original man, in fictitious man's world. And in fictitious man's world, bills come at you left, right, and center all day, every day, and so you need to. And I just think that we're outnumbered, like as natural builders. We're always one, and then there's 10,000. Like I can look out now and probably see 10,000. It'd be, if I went and knocked on all those doors for the next 5 years and asked if anybody knew about original man and how to build a wall. Just one single wall or two walls that can hold up a roof, two nice, big, thick earthen masonry walls, like the ones that are 1,000 years old all around the world, those nice 1,000-year-old walls. If I spent 5 years knocking on all these 10,000 people's houses that I can see here in the city of Melbourne, and said, hey, do you know how to build a wall that lasts 1,000 years like our ancestors? They'd all say, nah, man, sorry, I got to go. Like I got bills to pay.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
And it's like, well, and you know why he's got to pay his bills. His number one bill is his shelter bill, called rent or mortgage.
Well, and beyond that, they would also say, yeah, who cares? What's the point? They might not even they wouldn't even see the value, you know. They're just, they're
Yes, that's
so
right.
deep, it's so deep in the game and in the system that you're gonna think, well, yeah, I don't have time for this because there's no value in that earth
Yeah,
wall.
and that's fair enough. That is fair enough because they're fully vested in the game. And I've seen kids on their games, and some, you get to a point where you're right in the middle of the game, and then dad calls and says, "Come on, son, like it's time to eat dinner." It's like, "Dad, like I'm in the middle of this game. Are you serious? Like I can't pull out now. Like there's all these people around the world, and we got to finish this game." And they mean it. The kids mean it when they're in the game. So I understand people are in this game of fictitious man. But I think who I want to talk to is the up and coming, the youth, who are coming of age,
Yeah.
and so we as the natural builders have to find all these youth and show them what original man is about. And we know in our heart of hearts who original man is. It doesn't take much to, like, we know how powerful and how it feels to be around kindness and around, the good things. Like we know what original man is in our heart hearts, and we know this is a fictitious game, and we know, like, but the youth know it even more because you look at them in the playground and you see the way they transfer energy so freely, and the sound a playground makes in a school, it's a totally different sound to the adult factory or office environment. Anywhere where there's a bunch of adults gathered sounds completely different to where a whole bunch of children are gathered. They're screaming, they're jumping, and they're running, and they just have unlimited amounts of energy. So when you tell them that, when you tell them the traits of original man, they're just sort of like, oh, it sounds like me. Like that's, so children still have but they're, every day that they are in this fictitious world, they're being taught that there's a lack of everything. And, they're being taught the rules of the game here. So my question to all the natural builders is, how do we get together, and how do we start to overlay the gifting, pay it forward economy of original man into this reality? Or do we even do that? Like, I don't know whether we're supposed to do that, because it could be that this game is set for those who want to play this game. And, like I just met a guy yesterday who said, in order to survive in this game here in the city, you need $2,000 a day. You need to earn $2,000 a day. And, he described what he has to do in order to do that. And it seems pretty unrealistic. It's quite far-fetched. And he's not going to be able to do what he needs to do to earn $2,000 a day right now. He's walking across, roofs and fixing battens, one small part of the roof, just the battens onto the roof so that the other guy can come in and cover it with the other stuff. And he gets paid per lineal meter. And he's figured out how to hustle and wake up early and work his ass off, risking his life pretty much. He's walking with no harness or anything along the roof going boom, 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 and he's got a system worked out. And that's his way of surviving in this reality. So I'm saying it's just getting more and more unrealistic. The houses here in Sydney and Melbourne in Australia cost $1 million. And it's just absurd. You're never going to pay that back. You take on a mortgage, and children aren't even being taught what $1 million is, what $1 million means, and how much effort it would take, and where salaries are actually going down. They're not going up in many cases. They're not always going up. Not everyone's salary is constantly going up to match the $1 million houses, the price of houses. It's not all like some people's salary is going down while they're, so it's like, it's all unrealistic. It's all fictitious. And I think that it's time for us to find the youth, find the children, and start a new story and co-create that story in 3D, and start with just, building a wall. Like once you overcome the mystery of what a wall is, it's like, oh my God, okay, it's a house is really just 4 walls that hold up the roof. But of those 4, you really only need the 2 strong ones that can hold up the beams that carry the roof. And then the back wall doesn't have to be as strong as the 2 big fat ones that hold up the beams, that hold up the roof. For example, like I'm just trying to demystify shelter. Shelter is a lot more simple than what we've given it credit for. We've made it into this unreachable, impossible thing that you work your whole life for. But I guess the catch is that you get it day one. It's like you can move in today, but you'll be working for the rest of your life before you own it. And then when you get to that end of that 30-year road, you kind of go, well, do I own it now? And you sort of like, the definition of owning is so weird. It's like, oh, so I worked for 30 years for that definition. It's not any better than that. That's it. And it's
Yeah.
like,
You know, my first teacher when I first took a cob course back in 1998 or 99, I think it was, Yanto Evans. I think he's still with us. Anyways, the cob maestro here in Oregon.
yeah, yeah,
Little tiny hobbity looking Welsh guy. Anyway, he would talk so much smack about mortgages, you know, and you know, it literally translates as like the death grip, you know, the
yeah,
mortgage. It's like, or
yeah,
something like that. And
yeah,
he would just say, never get one. And, you know, and I really absorbed that, his perspective. And I was 19 at the time or something like that, you know, 18, 19. You know, it's true. I have avoided it. You know, I don't have that. You know, I have rent right now, but it goes to a good cause, you know, and you got to think about, you know, the priorities. What are your priorities? You know, some people, their priority is like, I got to have this really nice house, or I got to live in this nice part of town, and I got to keep up with whatever my friends, or, you know, I got to look this certain way. So I think a lot of it really all comes back to cultural aspects. I mean, we could get into like nitty gritty of the economic aspects, but you know, I'm not really an economist. I just see the changes, like you're saying. I see the inflation and the prices rising, and the salaries, the general like hourly wage, you know, for a carpenter hasn't gone up very much in the last 20 years.
yeah,
And I notice those kinds of things, and I just think about, you know, culturally, it's like, okay, well, to be a non-fictitious, to be more like the original people, we just have to, you know, it doesn't have to be some like big revolution or something, you know, and go off to some desert island. I mean, we can do it starting like right where we are, and just reorder our priorities within a cultural context, because you can't do it all by yourself. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, you know, and it creates community. You have to have a community to maintain your priorities, really. And I think that's kind of what we have going here too with natural building in general, is that there is some kind of there's an international community of natural builders, and a lot of whom see things similarly to what we're talking about right here, and try to promote this, you know, being able to just create your own shelter. We have all the red tape and all the building permits and codes and everything these days. It's very quite complicated. They almost try to make it like you need to be an expert really to you know, to design a house within the city limits. And that's something I see a lot these days, because that's what I work with, architectural design, daily now in my job. So, but yeah, just kind of back to what you were saying, and culturally, I think there's going to be this point where people more in mass, in larger groups, are going to start realizing that they have to move in a new direction. It's been happening already. I mean, you got all these eco villages, you got these communities popping up, but it's going to happen more within the cities, even from the very, you know, fictitious grounds, the cultural grounds of the fictitious society. You're going to have the emergence of some kind of more realistic society.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we're just forming, we're kind of at the edge of that. We're like cultural creatives, you know, we got to figure out how
yeah.
to make that work.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining in with the whole. You know, I've never called myself. I've never come. It's just you've given birth to this concept of like fictitious man versus realistic man. I've never used it before, so I don't know. It's sitting with me, and just hearing you talk then about the city, it's true. Like it's like a lot of the reason why we're here is that wherever we are, wherever we happen to be, it's often to do with, you know, so many random things, but a lot of times it's just the people. Like we want to be around these people, and And one thing I noticed that about the cities, I think what the lure of the city is, what the interest, why people want to come to these to participate, and why they're willing to go to such great lengths to have a roof over their heads, and an inferior roof over their heads, a roof over their heads that still needs exorbitant bills to heat and cool, and so that means having to just make extraordinary sacrifices where you just get in your car and drive for miles to do some kind of job. And like, these are enormous sacrifices that people are making to have a roof over their head, pretty much, and some food and whatever. But I think the only reason I've been able to find, after scouring, scouring my mind for questions for decades, is I think that these cities must have provided some people some sort of relief from too much insular way of thinking. So there must be an element of truth in the idea that wherever original man existed and everyone had this abundance of food and shelter, that somehow things got, like, oh, we're the so-and-so and we do it this way and that's the only way. And we have all these rules. But the traveler comes along and says, well, that's not how we do it. Where we're from, those people are allowed to do that. And those people who you're not allowed to do that, we're allowed, like, and it's like, really? Because you see the traveler come into your village and he just starts doing the wrong thing. And so there's someone in that village that says, I want to be like him. Why does he get to just do what? And so I guess when I was just in India recently, that I was asking why all these spectacular, picture perfect villages that had everything going for them in terms of food production and shelter and exquisite, up in the Himalayas. So it had beautiful fresh water flowing through, turning mills that could squash the grain if they needed, and all this kind of fertile land and beautiful houses made by hand, And I'm thinking, like, where is everyone? Why are they all abandoned? And I started asking, and they said, well, the young people, they just want to get a phone and get a girlfriend and or a boyfriend, and and the more I pried into that, it seemed like the young girls were the most like, they felt like all the rules were the strictest on them. Like, all the strict rules applied to young girls more than young boys. They were given a lot more leeway. And so the young girls just heard that if they go to the city, they can do what they want, type of thing. And I don't know whether they end up, thinking that is a better life, or whether they just get stuck there. But I just think the only thing I can see wrong with those original villages is that sometimes they impose too much sort of strict kind of rules. And it sort of does seem to be more around more strict for women, and I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's just my perception, but so I think what people love about the city is the multicultural thing. I think that's one of the biggest, is that the kids want to come and see each other. They want to see the whole human family. They don't want to just see all their sort of cousins and their clans and their people that all look like them and are sort of like the way that, like, they don't want to just see the people that remind them of themselves and everything in every way, with all the same traditional this and that and this and this and that. They go, well, I want to go where there's the people that are the opposite of me. And so that's got to be healthy for the gene pool, for all these young people from various cultures that want to come together into the city. And I think that's why they're willing to put up with so much suffering and such a huge sacrifice to get the shelter, is because of that. It's just like if kids decide they want something, if a child decides they want something, whatever it is, you'd be surprised what they're willing to do. Like, they've never, ever been interested in doing the dishes. They hate doing the dishes. But if it means they get to be on the screen for an hour and play another, like, they'll do the dishes for a week to get on that screen. So I just think that the cities, as expensive as they are to play in, I think the biggest attraction is that diversity.
Definitely. Yeah, you see a lot of this happening now. Well, and I wanted to tell, our viewers a little bit more about, your background, because your work and all these wonderful places, my understanding is that you really focus a lot on the youth, and doing these like youth mud building, mud mixing events. And can you tell us a little bit about your, you call them the musical mud stomps?
Yeah. Well, I think the first seed of the whole musical mud stomp. Oh, first of all, what a musical mud stomp is, in very simple terms, is it's definitely a performance piece. So the elements of a musical mud stomp are the audience, and that's always the biggest component. So the more that this performance piece is rehearsed, the better, of course, with any kind of performance for the audience. But it's an interactive audience that is also given permission to join in whenever they feel. But there's the audience. Then the main center stage concept is the barefoot mud stompers. And they're stomping in the mud with their bare feet, like you've seen in all the natural building videos, the Cobbers and all that. But they're stomping to a live music ensemble. And they're trying to synchronize. I always try and to try to get those two things synchronized, which is a lot harder than what you would think in the modern world. Like here we are in Australia. I think we could be we might hold the world record for the least amount of singing and dancing per person per year. So
that's not good.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I think our children, and that might be why I'm here. And I'm not much of a singer or a dancer, but I know how to do it. I know that it's possible. I know that it's possible for humans to dance. And I've seen people who can dance, and I'm willing to give it a try on any given day. And the children are always ready in anywhere on earth, even in Australia, where nobody sings and dances on a daily basis. Or I met a guy the other day who told me the first time he ever even just did any dance, anything at all, not even just like one dance move. The first time he did one sort of dance move was when he turned 35 years old. So he lived his whole life till he got to 35 without even tapping his foot.
Wow.
And without even ever humming. He never even hummed.
Wow.
He never even hummed. He just because he decided that that's before someone, actually I think he said it was some drugs he took that made him wake up to himself. And then he gave himself permission to sing and dance. So I hang around with the children because they're like original man. The children are all original man. They're all got the capacity for fun, for singing, for dancing, and giving it a go. Like they'll give anything a go. Let me try, they say. They're not like, oh, well, do I have permission to try? It's like, can I have permission? Can you give me permission to try? I'll do it now. So anyway, back to the musical mud stomp. It's the music, it's the dancing, which is the stomping of the mud, which is to churn it up. It's the audience. They're the key, because you need an audience, because that's sort of like, I don't know, that's like reinforcing what is happening. And it's growing, it grows what's happening. It's not just happening now with the 10 musicians and the 20 or 30. We've had up to 100 stompers. We've had 100 stompers, dancers stomping in the mud, and we've had 100 on the percussion music ensemble. So singing and drumming and making, trying to make an ensemble performance for the. So in that instance, but if the audience members multiply everything that's going on, because the visual images and the sounds and all the memories that get created go into all that audience's brain, and it does something. You can feel it when you see the audience and you're at a musical mud stomp. The presence of the audience is sort of like the most important part. It's way more important than the stomping and the music, because it's the reason for their existence. It's the audience is the reason for the existence. And then, and besides the stompers, then there's also a group that enacts some kind of food sharing ceremony, but Indigenous style, not the fictitious man. I'm going to keep going with this fictitious and original and realistic man. because in the fictitious world here, it's like there's a lack of food. Everywhere you see people lining up to get their food. Whereas you go to indigenous places and it's the opposite. There's like 10 servers for every guest. So even if 100 people descend upon a village, they call ahead and find out a way to double their numbers. So there's 200 people to serve you food. And you're always inundated with, and there's no lines in indigenous or original realistic man's world. There's never a line. It's just the food's always there and there's no line. You don't have to line up. So we try to bring that element in and outnumber the stompers and the musicians and the audience with food servers. So you have to divide up whatever you're working with. If you've got 100 people, then you always do a bit of maths, try to make the audience the biggest amount, and you can swap roles, but the audience is the biggest component, followed by the food servers, but you can followed by the dancers and the music. So it only takes a few people to start a song, and then you can get everyone to join in. So everyone can become the singers in a perfect world. So yeah, it's definitely. Sort of, yeah. So that's what a musical mud stomp is. It definitely came from the Solomon Islands when I was 19. I watched them. It was all that happening. They didn't use mud. They used all the natural grasses from the jungle, but singing and food were the key, was the overriding feeling. Like you could hear the construction site a mile away from the incredible choral singing that the audience was providing.
Wow.
And so that singing audience sometimes would sort of leave their singing choir and they'd go and join in with the build. And so it was like, I noticed that everyone was doing all the different roles, and sometimes everyone synchronized together in one instance where everyone was singing that particular part of the song. But they basically, in my mind as a 19-year-old, it felt like they were singing the house into existence. It felt like the singing part of it, but the audience were the singers. The audience were the singers. So they weren't just an audience; they were a construction activators.
Yeah, definitely.
And it felt like the only reason the builders were doing their job is because they had the audience. Like it's like they didn't want to just build their house because they think that there's a need for shelter. It's like, shit, we've got an audience. Let's go. We can do our thing, And so it sort of reverses everything. It reverses everything that we here in fictitious land are led to believe is how it's supposed to go. So okay. That's what. So yeah, I sat on that. I sat on that for a while, and I've just been experimenting with the kids, and they love it. There's never been a time where kids are not enthralled by the whole concept of a musical mud stomp and playing all those roles. There's always, there's always some kids who want to be in the audience first. They don't want to get in the mud first. They just want to be in the audience first. But usually most of them want to get in the mud first. They want to be on stage, the performers doing the main ooey gooey, sticky, sloppy, crazy thing. That's where they want to be. And so with kids, you kind of have to say, okay, you can be the next to dance, but we've only got this much room for the dance floor because it's a school environment. I mean, all these artificial environments where there's all these rules and stuff. So I think I've intentionally put myself into the belly of the beast, so to speak, into the most difficult place on earth, the most bureaucratic place on earth, the most red tape place on earth, the place on earth where it's the most difficult to pull off a musical mud stomp and get away with it. But now that I've done it with 15,000 kids in this most impossible place, it's 100% proof that it can happen anywhere on earth. Absolutely anywhere on earth. If you can get the least likely people to sing and dance on earth, to sing and dance walls into existence, as I have done, then it's possible for everybody anywhere to do it. And as you know, like this, Africa, we know that that's what's happening right now to this day. Walls are being sung into existence and stomped into existence, just like the musical mud stomp. That's not, I think there was a time where I thought I invented it based on the Solomon Islands thing, like not really, like I just thought, oh, what if I just replaced the weaving with the mud stomp, with the mud? And in my mind, it was like, yeah. And then I'm like, people must, and then of course, when I discovered about Jene, the 3,000-year-old mud brick city in Mali in West Africa, for example, of many, one of many, and saw their mud festival, I realized, of course, there's people doing the same thing as the Solomon Islanders, but with mud. And yes, there's their city that they've built that has 38,000 people that, you know, live there now. And that's been the population for 6,000 or 3,000 years or whatever, at least. We know it's at least 3,000 years old. So we have all these real life examples that exist outside of fictitious man's, you know, tunnel vision reality.
What I love about this is, you know, that it really is more about the people than the building. I mean, the building just ends up being whatever we need to build. Well, we can do that part. That's the easy part. The really intricate part is the kind of the social permaculture, if you will, you know, like the social aspect of the interaction, the community, and I think that's what sets you apart, is that you really focus on that part. You know, a lot of natural builders are like, look at this technique I did, you know, and you and I, we're the same way. We're really all about who was there and what did they bring, you know, what is the energy, and the musical mud stomps, from what I gather from your stories over time now, you've accomplished not only a lot of them, but with so many people at once. It had to be something amazing to be there, the energy that occurs there. And I'm really curious, you know, what someone like Dan Winter, who we met recently, what he would say about it, because there is some physics behind, you know, the bliss of children playing in the mud, and their bare feet in the mud. There's a, you know, electromagnetic, there's an energetic connection through the earth, and it actually affects the surrounding atmosphere and can cause things like, you know, spontaneous rainstorms to appear and stuff like that. This is recorded science, you know, and so we can look into that more, but it's just important to understand that the community, the many people coming together in a group, doing something like dancing and singing, connecting with the mud itself, touching it, it creates,
in the name of building a wall. Yeah, in the name of building a wall. It's not just singing and dancing for entertainment. It is that, but it's like we're singing and dancing for entertainment in the name of building a wall.
Well, you're like getting a building out of it, and it's important to acknowledge that we're also getting bliss. All the people there are in a state of bliss, and if that was the only reason you were doing it, it would be enough. So if you're only doing it for a wall, that would be great. If you're only doing it to get bliss, that would also be great, but you get both.
That's right. And what you said about the children, I have to give credit to all the children I've worked with to come up. I mean, first of all, Solomon Islands by far was the thing, but then actually working with 15,000 children in the least likely place on earth for people to sing and dance on a daily basis, I see they're ready to dance all day, every day. It's just that we're not giving them permission to. So anyway, it was from the children that I created this form of measurement, which I've called density, and it's like the regular density, which is, you know, DENSITY. But in my new density, there's a silent A in there. So there's a silent A inside, and so it looks a bit like density. Okay, and this density with a silent A, or you could maybe put a bit of a lilt in there. You could call it like a density, could sort of like density, you know, put a little accent in there if you want. But in this word density, basically density is a form of measurement that the walls that I've built with the community have we score very highly in this. And I basically challenge everyone on earth to try to create a higher density in the walls that I've built. They might not be very big and grand, and there might not be very many of them, but the density is very high, because density is actually love per square meters of construction. And I just feel like there is no greater way to increase the density of a building than to have children freely dance in the mud with their bare feet. The noises they make, and the facial expressions, and the body, everything that happens to a child when they start dancing in the mud, like that just blows the density measurements through the roof every time. and their unbridled joy starts to pull the parents in. And you know, a lot of comments I get from parents is like, I had to come and see what this damn mud thing was about because my son or my daughter just won't stop talking about it. You know, we're at their school, you know, and then we sort of like say, oh, well, we'll have an after school event, and you know, and the kids are like, oh, and it's like, and you can invite your mum and dads, and so you know, mum and dads usually have things to do after school, like, or they're at work still, but the kids put so much pressure on them that they have to come, and they've been putting pressure on them, like, because we're there for the whole school term. So by the end of the term, you know, whether the parents want to or not, it's like they have to come and see what all this fuss is about the damn mud. And then when they see their kids stomping in the mud, passing the blobs, that's another part of the dance, is the mud blob passing dance. So after it's been danced on by the children and completely drenched in children's unbridled joy, just drenched, like you can just see the love going into the mud, then we form it into blobs, and every single blob must go through every single child's hand, even if it means going in a circle. Like if we want to build over there, it's like, yeah, let's form a circle and we'll pass it around the circle to get it over there. So it's not efficient, but it's crazy, it's insane. But somehow that's just teaching us how to synchronize. And one day that dance could be applied to a real scenario where we're mixing the mud here, but we have to build up on the hill. So now we've gained that skill of just seamlessly passing these blobs and transporting this massive pile of mud way up on the hill over there. Definitely. In our big long, and we've learned the rhythm and the song that goes with it. Because
I hear from like my Hawaiian friends when I was in the Big Island, they talk a lot about the history of the construction there. You know, many years ago, the Hawaiian people would build these huge temples and structures, and they'd build whole hills out of rock, you know, and they're carrying the rocks from sometimes many miles away. I mean, dozens of miles. And they would form a line of people. And I think they would sing songs, and they would carry those heavy rocks and hand it to the next guy. And then, you know, probably women and men, they're carrying rocks and passing them over dozens of miles to get it to the building site. And that's just they know they have the skill of being able to do that with joy together.
Yeah, that's right. And that's right. So I think that what this modern world, I'll just show them talking about out there. You know, you've seen it before. It's just that suburban look that empty, void of any human sign of human life as far as the eye can see. One thing that's missing from that reality is giving people the chance to experience what strength in numbers feels like. You know, those Hawaiians who passed those boulders, like I can't imagine anything more. I just can't imagine anything better than that, to think like, look what we just did. So to try to do that in modern man's terms, if you started from the beginning, if you started from scratch, to try to make that happen and move all those rocks, the incredible amount of sacrifices, so many millions, first of all, you have to call up and get the crane. And it's like, and then that came from some slaves, like digging out the iron ore and processing in some nightmarish place. And then you have to get the oil to fuel the crane. And in order to get the oil, you have to, have a whole bunch of wars to fight over the oil and get it at the right price. And then, it's just like everyone makes out that this is like a convenient reality. It's totally inconvenient. It's totally unrealistic. That idea of everybody just going down together and forming a long, long line, calling everyone you've ever known and getting everyone to come. Like, and everyone's like, woohoo, we're traveling across the island to the other side. Why? To help outdo this thing. We're going to strengthen numbers. And then after you do that all day, and then you just see this massive pile of rocks up there, And you go up there, and then everyone goes up and sits up there and just sees this humongous pile of rocks. And it's like, and you look back at the place where they came from, and then you look at the group and you're like, are we gods or what? You know, like there's nothing better than that. It doesn't get any better than strength in numbers. And this reality, it doesn't give us a chance to experience strength in numbers, except in, you know, like when you go to the football stadium and the grand final, you know, the big games are on it, and then you get a sense, a little taste of strength in numbers, but it's really just how much noise you can make. That's about it. It's like, look how much noise we can all make together. And that's about the only strength you get. And there is sort of an energy, like, yeah, there's an energy of excitement. Look how much, you know, it's like, yes, our team's winning. And then you go, wow, okay, excitement does feel better together.
Yeah.
But that's just like one tiny slither of what's possible with strength in numbers.
Well, you talk a lot in your book, the Muddyfesto book, about this idea of, you know, the instinctual urge, I think you call it, the instinctual urge to build. And I think that, you know, what we're seeing here is that it's not just an instinctual urge to like mix mud and stack it up. Although, you know, tiny kids like 2 years old, they will do that by themselves.
Yeah.
But I think there's also kind of an instinctual, you know, maybe like a genetic memory, or, you know, there's sort of a deeply ingrained ancestral memory of working together in larger groups that we're not generally accessing very much. But once you experience it and you feel it, there is a feeling there, right? And so I think more people should experience that. And that's what's so cool about your musical mud stomp. So I hope that you get more opportunities, and I can come and help you out, and we can do more of those, because it's definitely I think it's the pinnacle of kind of, you know, what we're about, you know.
Yeah, well, having said that, like you're kind of making out like it's all happening over here. A lot of what I'm saying is, for example, what I want to say is, I don't think that the very first musical mud stomp that I can ever remember that I did, I don't think it's gotten any better than that. It took place in Atlanta, Georgia,
right?
And I at the time was hanging out in a creative arts scene, full of poets and dancers and singers, and they called it poetry, but it was really just everything. And a lot of people were, you know, what I felt like a major thing that was happening is that of all ages, but there was a lot of youth involved. It was a youth-driven, but also heavily supported by the elders, to tell the truth about or to temper what was happening in the mainstream music industry with hip hop and rap. And so rap was coming and presented, it sort of presented people, and African American people in particular, as sort of like, you know, pretty much a savage type of a image. And so everyone wanted to sort of like say, well, you know, the industry has done that. The industry is intentionally trying to make us look bad, but we need to set the record straight, and for ourselves, just so we as African Americans don't get polluted by what the industry is saying we are. So let's just create a sacred place where we can actually say who we are, and tell all the good stories of all, and so the spoken word just became a place where we're just gonna let people hear exactly what we're saying, and all the rhymes and all the stories and all the dances and all the, you know, they brought back all the good stuff to sort of like, you know. So where I'm going with this is that I was in that scene, and I also noticed that there were, you know, I found out, well, I didn't find out about 100%, but just the whole idea of the redlining, where all the corporate banks in America specifically, you know, made it impossible for Black people to own property. They put red lines around certain places where you couldn't get a mortgage, so that only white people could participate in the American dream or whatever. So that was going on, where there was a lot of people struggling, you know, to just maintain shelter in amongst this incredible artistic self-expression community where it was so, where everybody felt so generous in spirit to just give of themselves, either as the audience members. It was always, the most generosity came from the audience. The audience was always cheering and making the person on stage feel like a superstar. And those gatherings did actually create some real superstars. But yeah, so what happened was, in Atlanta, when I discovered Earthen masonry and the Cobb building and read Becky B's book, it was like this. And so I just one of the girls that was from the scene, or that I'd met somehow, she was a hip hop dance teacher, and she was a student at Georgia, at the university there. She was a student doing her studies there. But in her school holidays, she decided to volunteer and find all the youth in Atlanta who were unable, whose parents were unable to afford to send them to any sort of summer camp. And so she got together all her sort of friends from college, from her college, from her university where she was studying, and they put together, and they all volunteered. There was no funding. They just all volunteered to put on a summer camp for all the kids who didn't have anywhere to go. And so when I heard about that, that's when I decided to start to actually, I think I'd already made my small scale model of Earthen masonry, and I was like, and I laid down some foundation. I said, it was a 20-foot diamond. But what I'm saying is that the best musical mud stomp that I've ever, it has never gotten any better than the ones that I did in Atlanta with Kelly Faulkner. I fell out of touch with Kelly, but she brought an instant magic just by the fact she'd worked with these kids, I think, for a while. So she had their respect. And there was about 100 of them. And so there was 100 kids who were coming to Kelly Faulkner's summer camp. And she did lots of activities with them. She took them to gardens, to organic farms, and she just really wanted to show them everything that she was able to see from her, because she was from LA and she was transported to Atlanta. And she was part of this movement to want to uplift the community and serve the community and give back to the community and sort of heal the wounded image that mainstream America was presenting through rap and stuff about Black people. So it was sort of like, it was their way of fighting back, of just, doing something positive to change the image for the kids too. So I don't know how she did it, but I just told her what I saw in my head as a musical mud stomp based on my experience in the Solomon Islands some 20 years before. And I said, this is how I mix the mud up with my own feet, and this is how I make a blob. But I'm imagining that, the kids come here and just use their, she just gave them these ideas, and they were able to sort of instantly synchronize with one another. And I don't know how it happened, but it was like someone would call something out and it had some reference to a modern hip hop song, and they all just got on that beat, and then they started picking up tins and cans, and they had bottles. I think I made some empty water bottles full of rocks and stuff to be shakers, and I just had this instinct that they were going to know percussion, and it was just, it wasn't recorded on video. I just always thought that I'd be there forever and I'd have, I'd eventually record it, but it just never happened that way. But the performances included all kind of acrobatics, all kind of incredible synchronicity of body and sound that the people sung. Like, so they just went in, they kind of blended everything. The kids went back to church singing, church harmonies with some sort of hip hop thing. Like, it just was this incredible. Even Kelly was shocked herself. But she also knew what she was doing. So she kind of like got it into them, and she laid it down like a really fierce coach about what she expected of them and how good this was going to be. And she was relentless. And if she saw anyone that wasn't in the whole line, so, suddenly all this mud went from the pile down here all the way up there into the wall. So I was running up and down the line. I didn't know where to be. Like, So I had to just stay at my end. I wanted to see the whole thing, but all the mud was coming up and being made into bricks up there. Like, you know, so I was trying to stop the bottlenecks, and the bottleneck was, you know, getting the mud onto the wall and seeing the wall go up. And but those kids just in minutes just totally got into it. They'd never ever done it before. But I think I'm just saying to say I think I don't think it ever got any better than that. It never got it. Never even came close. It's never even come close to that. And it happened in an instant. So it's not something that I hold the keys to. It's like the kids, the youth, they hold the keys.
Yeah,
We
well
as
said.
adults just need to unlock and give them permission and validation. And because a lot of times then those kids, they cranked out so much bricks in such a short period of time, but they were in no way, shape or form driven by money. Even though they were probably some of the poorest kids in America, they couldn't even afford to go to the government summer camp, which was virtually, you know, free. And then I got to live in that environment, and I saw just how stretched people were to pay their bills. And I was finding out, like looking at people's pay packet, you know, and it's atrocious, you know, that these people were being paid. I mean, in my mind, it felt like, how is that even possible that you could feed a family and support a family on that amount? And then so I'm just saying, like, the so-called poorest people of America were able to do that. And it's never gotten any better than that. And so I don't feel like the only answers that are here is the difficulty of the system. It's just lots of red tape and bureaucracy. That I feel like I'm just here as some sort of gamer myself. I'm like a gamer, like just playing the impossible game of trying to get the kids least able or willing or have permission to dance and sing to do it. Whereas those kids, they might not have had any money, they might not have had any power, but they claimed they had no fear of singing and dancing. Zero. In fact, they took it to a level that, you know, the highest levels. They took it to the highest levels instantly, just based on their collective understanding of whatever the hip hop culture was about, and whatever Kelly had imparted on them as a very, just a very, she was a very, she had the all spectrum, everything in the spectrum she was very highly academic. She knew exactly what she was doing. She'd specifically, her mother was a teacher, I believe, or a professor or some high level academic. And she decided to come to Atlanta to put her mother's ideas into action. And so she did that via her summer camp. And so I don't think, I think that all the elements of the musical mud stomp lie with our children. Like, sorry, the success of musical mud stomps around the world lie with our children.
Well, that's kind of true of everything in the world right now, you know, and also realizing that if we take the musical mud stomp and extrapolate it out to all of our activities, you know, blurring those lines, like you say, blurring between work and play.
Yeah.
How important is that, you know, and why is it that a lot of the adults around in the modern city lifestyle, they don't see the importance of blurring work and play? In fact, if you try to blur work and play in a lot of situations, people just, you know, make fun of you and think you're ridiculous or something. And because I mean, I've experienced that, and I'm like, well, I cob and I have fun, you know, I have a great time. So, you know, it's not everybody, but I think that people are just realizing and waking up to, you know, fun is incredibly important, you know, and kids know how to have fun. And so, you know, we can almost, as adults, if we need to, people can take cues from the kids, like, oh, they're having fun. Well, like you said, the kids draw their parents in, and then the parents have more fun. And people always ask me, well, what's the best natural building technique, or, you know, which way is the easiest or the most efficient? And I'm like, well, which way do you enjoy the most? You know, do you enjoy rammed earth, or do you enjoy cob, or do you enjoy light clay straw, or, you know, and a lot of it comes down to, you know, what's a system that works for the people involved? Are they having a good time? Can they keep it up? Can you keep doing it for a week or two straight and not get bored and tired of it?
And I think the answer to everything you just said, what lies in music and dance. There's
Yeah.
not a single thing where music and dance can't make it less boring or more sustainable, more able to continue forward. You know, and fun, like you said. So in order for music and dance to be all it's meant to be, you definitely need an audience. You know, music and dance was not created for just a lone pioneer. That, you know, that is one type of dance, to just go, okay, I'm going to do the lone pioneer dance now. I'm going to walk, you know, on a pilgrimage to the Hermitage, and I just want to be by myself and my creator, and you know, but I think that the reason you do that is because you ultimately want to come back stronger to serve humanity. And, you know, that would be the reason why, or because you want to heal and, you know, get back to who you were.
Yeah.
It's not, there's not many people who just want to be alone forever, all the time, for the rest of their life. So I think, yeah, the big missing elements in our modern life is the team idea, and you know, and the more we can see the beauty of strength in numbers, and the power of music and dance as a sort of activator of construction, an activator of shelter, you know, then it sort of changes the game. If we think in terms of, we're going to sing this wall into existence, or we're going to sing this anything into existence, just like, you know, sing the journey, like, yeah, like the journey, like you see those thing where they're rowing, you know, trying to keep up with the rhythm, you know, and they got a song to motivate them to go. It's like,
Definitely.
we all need to, because in the city, it is all about being an individual, and it's a bit about being a quiet, supposedly, you know, efficient, industrious individual, and singing and dancing would sort of, but I don't know, like, I just want to see more of what I've just had a little tiny taste of, and that is allowing children back into the construction site, allowing toddlers back into the construction site. I think once you start doing that and working around, okay, because otherwise people are paying a gigantic component of their hard-earned money to pay someone else to take care of their toddlers so that they can, so it's just like, no, they're the most important element at the construction site. If we don't have them there, they set the tone. The toddlers set the tone. They set the tone, and then you work from that. And then you go, okay, we've got the toddlers, right? They've set the tone. Then, and you go up through the age groups, and every type of, you know, person, of every little, you know, toddlers to whatever they're called, I don't know, all the different names of kids. And then I think it all comes together in the adolescent youth, like those ones that Kelly brought. The adolescent youth, they are sort of like it's like the pinnacle of the juncture between the original pure child, you know, and the original pure child and the adult. So they're a hybrid. The adolescent youth is a hybrid of the child and the adult. And they've got it all. They've got all their childhood imagination, and they can fully draw back on that and go right into their deepest, you know, unbridled imagination. But by the time they're adolescent, they fully grasp what the adult goal is, and what the purpose of an adult is, and they can you know, do both. They can, you know, they can do both. And so I think they're the adolescent youth are the most underrated and underutilized resource that we've got. They're just sitting there being ignored when they hold all the keys to everything we've ever dreamed of.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what our goal is. We're going to engage people and engage all the age groups. And anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about this more with you, and thanks for doing this interview with me, David. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's
my
really
pleasure.
cool.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I love talking to you and brainstorming with you. And yeah, I'd love to see us, open this conversation up to more people and see something big happen, in our little lifetimes, what we've got left,
Yeah,
some sort of like, yeah, just overlaying what from living with the Dogon people in Mali, that generosity of spirit, that pay it forward, to overlay that into this reality, even if it's just for an hour or two, just for an hour or two, let's just overlay that reality into this reality. And how does that look, and how does that work, and how do you basically pay people? Like, what's the currency in that reality when you take 200 people out of their busy schedules and get them together to create a wall? And I've written down a lot of things and thought it through, but I know that there's other minds who are more mathematical and more currency sort of based, who could come up with something better, but I feel like I'm just back at the drawing table of how that actually works. How do you incentivize and recognize and reward people for their or just how do you get us all to be like those adolescent youth that Kelly Faulkner brought to me in Atlanta, who are just so willing and able to just magically dance a wall into existence? What's all the psychic forces that have to be at play in order for that to happen again and again and again, or even just once, so we can sort of go, well, okay, we can just review it and go, well, that worked, but we need to tweak it here. And I think some people will tweak it down a path of like, it's purely, everything is related to money or whatever. But other people might go find another way, that another sort of currency is born out of it. And it might be that, there might be some other way of that the pay it forward gifting based society vibe can work in the modern society, which is the opposite. It's not gifting, pay it forward. It's sort of like, take on a debt first, which is the opposite, isn't it? Take on a debt first and then struggle to pay it back forever.
well, I see a lot of possibilities, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot more. But we could get a group of youth that's really into this idea and practice the same way you'd get together with like an orchestra and practice, and everybody would get really good at their different jobs, and then we could film it once and for all and get a really good example and then put it on YouTube. And I think just the more people that just realize, oh, that looks like fun, and look, they're getting something done too. And then, the people will all see a lot of value. And I think it's more just an exposure thing. So I hope that, this interview is just the start. We can do more, and we'll get people exposed to our ideas and your wonderful ideas. I just really appreciate your contribution and all your wonderful work. And thank you again.
Okay, my pleasure. Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, sounds good. All right, bye,
Take care,
Scott.
David.
Yeah, you too.